What I talked about was the beliefs around money that we all developed, and a lot of those beliefs are mistaken beliefs. I call that a broken money story. Many of your clients come to you with mistaken beliefs, do they not? And part of your job is to show them there may be a different way to perceive money and to think about money and how money enters their life. Now here's the interesting thing. We know that money intersects every aspect of one's life, right? There's not a part of your life that money doesn't influence in some way and vice versa. So here's what we know. When we change our money story, when we change our beliefs around money, we change our lives. And we, as financial professionals, are not immune from broken money stories, right? We as humans have those stories, right? So this part of my talk, this short part here is, I like to call it, you earn what you believe, because our success will never rise above the level of our beliefs of what we think is possible. If you ever find yourself in a situation, there's a challenge, personal, professional, doesn't matter. Things aren't going quite the way you want them to go. One of the things you need to look at is, what do you believe about the situation? What do you believe about money? What do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about your clients? What do you believe about your industry, your value, right? We need to look there first. Sometimes we try to just go to tactical things, and that's okay, but sometimes there's a belief that's holding us back. And the more we can shine light and become aware of those beliefs, the more successful we'll be. And the same thing is true for our prospects and clients, right? Because they come to us with broken money stories that sometimes keep them from acting. Right, this morning we're talking a little bit about how do you get someone to move from understanding what you teach them to actually taking action on what you teach them. And quite often the barrier is a belief that they grew up with, right? So let's talk about money, right? Let's talk about money beliefs while we're here today. What messages did you hear when you were young? Did your parents talk about money? Did they fight over money? Did they tell you, like, you know, what do you think, money grows on trees? Well, money doesn't grow on, well, money grows on trees. Well, most people say money doesn't grow on trees, but don't tell that to an apple farmer, right? He'll tell you money grows on trees. So what messages did you hear? That's my parents, Ruth and Joe. That's their wedding in New York when they got married, just shortly after World War II. And I picked up some beliefs around money from my parents. Now, my parents grew up where they were children of the Great Depression. So they grew up when they were young, they were in the Depression. So naturally, their money story was cautious, right? They had a cautious money story, would make sense. They saw money as something to guard rather than something to grow. And so I grew up with that guarding money story, right? You never know when you can lose it all story. So I grew up with an anxiety around never having enough, right? And it wasn't until later in my life where I learned how money worked that I was able to change that story. And you've probably seen that in your own career, right? The more you learn how money works, the more you become aware of some of your beliefs and mistaken assumptions around money. And so you write a new story for yourself. My mother was anxious around money. My mother was anxious about everything. I think that's just mothers in general, right? Now, my father didn't like it when people showed off their money. He labeled that conspicuous consumption, right? Trying to show off their money. So for instance, our neighbor drove a Cadillac. My father was disapproving. He thought that was too much. No one needed a Cadillac. He could drive his Plymouth or his Chevy or his Buick, right? So what happened is this anxiety of mine that I picked up kind of from my parents started to show up in not so good ways. In fact, I developed a bad case of money denial. There's a lot of that out there. A lot of people, they're anxious around money, so they don't want to look at it. They don't want to pay attention to it, right? Now, I told myself that I had an abundance mentality, that there'll always be enough, but that was fiction. Actually, deep down inside, I had a feeling there would never be enough, and I think it was deeper than that. I think there was a part of me that thought that I wasn't enough. And so what I learned, kind of the hard way, is that I thought my net worth determined my self-worth. And we know that that's not a good way to think. That's kind of a booby prize, right? I started making money decisions designed to prove my success to others. My cars were fancier than I needed. I even owned a couple of Cadillacs. Sorry, Dad. Right? My house is a little larger than needed. I think I was measuring my self-worth by square footage of my house. And I learned that that was not a good way to live, and I slowly shifted that thinking to more abundance mentality. So I want to ask you, what message around money did you receive when you were young that maybe you're still fighting against now? Right? Maybe there's some message, something that your parents said, something that others said, something you picked up from the internet, whatever. What belief that is maybe restricting your ability to attract and bring more money into your life and be as successful as you want to. So I want to have you reflect on this, and we're going to have a little fun doing this. So I heard a couple of very interesting ones. One is, one gentleman, Jared, grew up in an environment where there was never enough. And so I asked him, does that feeling of never enough still with you? And he said, yes, right? My anxiety around money of never having enough, it's like a song on the radio that will never stop playing. So what I have to do is turn the volume down, right? I may rewire the brain, I may overcome, but at least we become aware of it. And when we become aware of that, then we have a choice, don't we? We can let it play and let it rule us, or we can turn the volume down. Now, another interesting one I heard was that money is power. And as we know, it could be good power or not so good power, right? Money is used to manipulate people. You see it in families. You see it in businesses, you see it in politics, and yet money can also be used to do great things. So the first step towards rewriting your money story and having a healthier money story is to become aware. What are some of these beliefs? Understand how money works, which you do in your profession, and you're always learning about that, and then you start to write a new money story. When you become aware of your money story, when you become aware of your relationship with money, and then you softly become aware of your prospects and clients' relationship with money, you can have a very honest, authentic conversation. And you can help them move through some barriers, some things that may be stopping them from doing the things that intellectually they know they need to do, but emotionally, on some level, belief level, they don't see themselves doing that. So some of the beliefs that I've interviewed over 100 people around money stories. One of them is, money changes people for the worse. Michael is a gentleman that I interviewed, and he grew up thinking that, rich people were greedy and cheaters and grifters and all that. Well, some are, most aren't, right? That's true with most generalizations, is it not? Some are, but most aren't, right? But he couldn't become what he resented. If he resented people with money, how is he going to get through that? And he had to work on himself to do that. A lot of people say, I don't care about money. Money isn't important to me. Money intersects all aspects of our life. So that's kind of like saying, air isn't important to me, right? A lot of times when people say they don't care about money, it's not important. It's actually money denial. I'm not good with money. Kind of another form of money denial. People just resist. They don't think they're good at it. That's partly your job, right? To help them through these barriers, these limiting beliefs. Money is a scarce resource. That's a big one. Now, here's something interesting. Neuroscientists will tell you that we as humans are born into this world with a scarcity negativity bias. That's part of our survival instinct. The problem or the challenge is that because we have that bias, we have to work on overcoming that bias. And some of us do a better job of that than others. The truth is, money is not a scarce resource. Now, it may feel scarce in your pocket, in your wallet, in your bank account at the moment. I get that. But the truth is, money flows. Money flows through the economy. Money is energy. We have to get ourselves into the flow. Now, one of the ways that I got myself into the flow is by helping other people make more money. That's one way you get into the flow, is helping others, right? Here's one of the things to remember about the flow of money. Money follows perceived value. Let me say that again. Money follows perceived value. The value that people perceive about you and the work you do and the messages you bring, that's how successful you will be. When you bring more value, you bring more value that people get, that people understand. It's not money follows value, money follows perceived value. Does that make sense? All right, good. So the good news is, through the discovery of neuroplasticity, scientists have realized that we actually can rewire the brain. We can rewire the brain. It's not easy, and it can be done. So what we need to do is we need to find those limiting beliefs, those statements that we make to ourselves, and just shift them a little bit and repeat them on a regular basis. Money can be used for good in this world. Money doesn't have to be evil, greedy, negative, right? It can be used for good. I take care of my money. I'm a good steward of my money. And that's one thing you help your clients. You help them become better stewards of their money for themselves and for future generations. I'm learning about money. One of the biggest things that you can do is educate your clients around how money works, what you're doing, why you're doing, a little more on that in a minute, so people can make educated decisions. And then finally, money is an abundant resource and flows like a river. In my TED Talk, I had a little fun. I said, money is an abundant resource and flows like a river, and I'm jumping into the currency. Well, little do most people know that currency, right, another word for money, the root of that word is currens, which is Latin for flow, like a river. Currency flows like a river, and so does money. So, how to rewire? We could spend the whole day on this, but just briefly, expect. What you expect tends to manifest in your life. Having that positive expectation. Would you agree with me that going into any situation, having an expectation of the outcome increases the chances of that outcome happening? Sure. Doesn't guarantee it, but increases the chances, partly because we see the opportunities that we expect. And we have subtle changes in our thinking, in our words, and our actions that manifest that for ourselves. We have to align our thoughts and actions. We have to make sure that our beliefs and our actions are congruent. When they're not, then there's discord, then there's tension. So we work on that. We work on repeating. That's how the brain gets rewired, through repetition of the belief, through repetition of the thought, through repetition of the speech. I recommend very strongly that you develop a few affirmations around money or anything else you want to create in your life, and you speak them out. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the neuroscience behind the power of speaking words out. You speaking them out and your prospects and clients speaking them out to you, and how that makes a difference. And then finally, what happens is you normalize, meaning the results rise to the level of your beliefs. And as your beliefs expand, then your results expand. You earn what you believe about yourself, about your business, about the value that you bring, about money, etc. And ultimately, it comes down to empathy. How do we connect with other humans? How do humans feel comfortable connecting with us? It is through empathy. It is through getting the sense that we have empathy, an understanding, and appreciation for them and where they are. And so when we do this work for ourselves, we can then help them in a gentle way do the work for themselves. And everyone benefits from that. Not just the individuals, but everyone they touch, and even generations. It's all about empathy. In a few minutes, we're going to talk about messaging your value. Empathy is the core of that. Making sure that people can see themselves in your message. How you talk about your value should be like holding up a mirror to people, and they see themselves in the mirror. They understand what you're saying. They can identify with it. Now, in front of you is a handout that gives you a link